There is fresh uncertainty for Australia's defence pact with the US as the Pentagon orders a review into the AUKUS deal. Brigadier Langford served as Director General of Future Land Warfare before retiring from the Australian Army. He's warning the potential cancellation of nuclear submarines under AUKUS will leave a capability gap. He joins us live now from Canberra. Ian, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. You've cast doubt over the government's spin on this today, that the review is just a standard process that's to be expected with the new administration in the White House. You're suggesting in an opinion piece in The Australian that it's more significant than that. Why have you formed that view?
Well, thanks, Ashleigh. Thanks for having us. I think the announcement of this review really does demonstrate a realignment of the US defence and foreign policy agenda to accord with Donald Trump's America First strategy. In relation to the 2021 AUKUS announcement, particularly Pillar 1, the transfer of Virginia-class submarine from the US to Australia, what concerns the Americans is obviously the build rate of Virginia-class, and indeed also their nuclear boat, the Columbia-class, as it relates to their own capabilities in competition with a resurgent China, particularly in Eastern North Asia and the maritime approaches, and how they manage that transfer of 3 submarines to Australia across a period where they'll be in real competition with the Chinese. So the announcement of this review really comes as no surprise, as has been acknowledged. The submarine capability is critical to how the US imagines it managing great power competition in Eastern North Asia. And of course, Australia, as a long and trusted ally of the Americans, will rely on this capability to provide essentially what is a gap without the Virginia-class as we move into the mid to late 2030s and acquire the SSN AUKUS with the United Kingdom. So the real concern is the US submarine build rate, the ability for them to deter China in Eastern North Asia, and the requirement for Australia to replace its current Collins-class submarines with eventually the SSN AUKUS class by using 3 to 5 Virginia-class submarines from the Americans in that period between 2030 and the mid to late period of that decade.
So just expand on that point for us about Australia's capabilities. If the US does delay or even cancel that plan, what is your assessment of what that does for our defence force, and how worried are you that we may be caught out unprepared in the shorter term before that submarine transfer is even due?
Yeah, well, in relation to the undersea capability as a critical deterrence, no doubt your viewers will be aware it really is a fundamental component of Australia's national defence strategy. And so that deterrent capability in the form of a Virginia-class submarine is what will manage that period, which many have assessed as being a heightened tension period between the US and China, particularly as it relates to the Taiwan issue. And from an Australian point of view, should that transfer not occur, then we will rely on effectively having to either accelerate the AUKUS construction plan with the British, or indeed, I think, also leverage the Submarine Rotation Force West plan, which begins in 2027 out of HMAS Sterling in Perth, to allow US and UK flag submarines to base and operate from that location throughout the later part of this decade and well into mid-decade, in the context of not having a capability of our own. It should also be said that in the broader context of Australia's defence capability and uplift, as significant as Pillar 1 is, we have other hedging strategies and other important capabilities in the form of long-range strike, in the form of air defence, in the form of air and missile defence, that we have to in parallel acquire both to deter and protect in our region, but also contribute in an alliance framework to collective self-defence, as I said, in a period of heightened conflict, when there are assessments by many that there is a likelihood of conflict as it relates to Taiwan, especially from 2027 onwards, and in the region more broadly into the middle and latter part of next decade. So the submarines form really a bulwark of Australia's contribution to that. They form really an elemental component of our national defence strategy, and much of our planned capital investment is focused on that. And so as it relates to AUKUS and our reliance on the Americans for the transfer of Virginias, it is significant. And in the absence of that, Australia will need to rapidly either accelerate the SSN AUKUS production with the British, which would be unlikely given the constraints they have in their own shipbuilding facilities at Barrow and Furness in the United Kingdom, or indeed rely on an increase in tempo of US and UK flag submarines moving through HMAS Sterling as part of the rotation plan, which begins in 2027.
We've seen in recent weeks more pressure coming from the Trump administration to the Albanese government over Australia's defence spending levels. We know the Prime Minister is about to head off to the G7 and is hopeful of having a face-to-face meeting with the US President. The timing of the announcement of this review is pretty interesting, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think, the Americans could have conducted this review without a public announcement. Elridge Colby, who will lead it, is somebody who ostensibly supports AUKUS in his congressional testimony as part of his confirmation, but does so with significant doubt around Pillar 1. And of course, we've seen Secretary Hegseth call for an uplift in defence spending in this country at the recent Shangri-La dialogue. So I suspect that this is part of a deliberate ploy on the part of the Americans. This is how they do statecraft very well, which is to signal potentially in discussions to occur between our Prime Minister and the President that defence funding in this country will be an issue at which Donald Trump may ask for an opinion from Anthony Albanese in terms of how he plans to achieve that uplift, as has been indicated, is necessary to contribute to the US alliance framework in our part of the world, but also recognise that the world is changing. The international system is becoming more dangerous. Our strategic calculus requires a greater element of national power in the form of military power. And the US is signalling that they want to understand